Okay, welcome to Lancaster. I am Dr. Mark Lacy, Associate Director of Security Lancaster, leading the theme on security futures. This is Daniel Prince, who's the Business Partnership Manager and also an Associate Director of the Centre. This is Mark Pegram, who is a student on the MSc in Cybersecurity, who's helped to develop a company that we're going to talk about today. And at the back of the room, tweeting the event, is Ian Jackson, a journalist, PhD student. And today we're joined by Bold Creative, a company from London, Shoreditch, working on new media and a variety of issues related to young people. We have Rebecca, Martin and Luke. I'm going to give an introduction on what we've been doing as part of Security Lancaster and talk about what we're planning to do today. Security Lancaster is an interdisciplinary centre that explores many aspects of security and technology in the contemporary world. And in particular, we focus on cybersecurity. And the centre is seen as an academic centre of excellence in cybersecurity research. But we want to kind of broaden the focus of Security Lancaster, not just to focus on cybersecurity, but on a whole range of issues related to security and society. Now, one of the things that I've been doing is teaching on the MSc in cybersecurity, trying to get the students who are computer scientists, often people with considerable experience in the business world, getting them to think about broader global political and economic issues, emerging problems and trends. And what became clear to me is that this is a time when you can have very interesting conversations between different people, computer scientists, psychologists, social scientists, people from the business world. And it's not simply that the conversations are interesting, they're essential, we would argue. And you can't really make sense of what is going on in the world right now unless you open up the dialogue. Dialogue that is needed because of the speed of technological change and of all the uncertainties in a world that is changing very fast. A world that generates new problems and also new opportunities. We live in a time where we confront seemingly unpredictable events on a very regular basis. And so you need this broader conversation to try and make sense of where we are in terms of technology and society. So traditionally, universities have been spaces where you have all these different people working on very interesting problems in different faculties. But often there isn't much conversation between the faculties for various reasons. But with Security Lancaster, we have tried to create a space where those conversations between faculties and different academics, different disciplines, where these conversations can take place. So what I wanted to do in the course on cybersecurity was a section where the students would think about future scenarios to tell the story of how a technology or a government policy would be used or abused in 2019. To get the students to think about bigger debates on the future of society and to kind of give their input into what they saw as the future problems, the emerging problems. Yeah? So not to get academic in international relations or sociology, to kind of give their take on the world, but to get the perspective of people who really understand the technology. Because I think the point we're trying to make is that sometimes you need to listen to people who are outside the kind of usual spaces where policies and ideas about the future are formulated. And so I wanted people to think about an existing or emerging technology in the context of a social or economic problem and to create a story about what could happen, the unintended consequences of a new technology or a new policy, and to base the scenario in technical knowledge, in the technical expertise that the students all have. And so on the one hand, I was using methods from the business world, scenario planning, where basically what happens is organizations develop a number of different scenarios and then work out the best way to kind of be able to adapt in a flexible manner to a number of different scenarios that might confront them in coming years. But on the other hand, I was also interested in the work by designers and architects in what is known as design fiction or critical design, an area of design and architecture where imaginative scenarios are created to explore the future of technology, architecture and design, and to present the ideas about the future in a very imaginative and innovative way. You can make a short film, short story, maybe a graphic novel. And this is used in many ways, not simply to kind of speculate on where we could be heading, but also to get the attention of people in an accessible and kind of attention-grabbing way. So part of my thinking here was to get the MA student or the MSc students, experienced people, to do something very different from what they might do in their day jobs. This wasn't a case of, okay, here's a problem, you've got to kind of work out a solution. It's like, well, you create the problem. You think about what the problems are going to be in the coming years. So it's a very creative exercise that we tried to develop earlier in the summer when we did the first kind of experiment to see how this was going to play out. And also part of the thinking comes from this idea that human beings often become habituated to certain ways of seeing the world, caught up in very conventional ways of thinking in whatever organisation they're in. We kind of get used to certain ways of thinking, and we need to seek ways to disrupt that, to unsettle this habituation, to see what's around the corner, but what we might not be open to or what we might not see for whatever reason, because we're kind of thinking in terms of the ways that we've been taught or the kind of dominant ideas in the organisation. So we wanted to create a space where you can break that down for a while and unsettle that. And here the thinking was very much influenced by kind of books that have been very influential in the last couple of years, like Black Swans. The idea that our thinking about risk can often dull our senses to the unpredictable events that kind of in front of us, but we can't see because we need to expand our kind of horizons. So I thought it was a chance to get the students to offer their contribution to debate on where technology was heading, what problems they thought were on the horizon, using their expertise. So the project was simply called Cybersecurity Event 2019, and it took place earlier in the summer. We had 4 groups. One of the projects was on cloud computing and taxation, and it speculated on an event very similar to the one that took place this summer, a couple of months later, involving a UK bank. It was a much more kind of exaggerated example of what happened this summer, but it was on similar lines. One of the case studies mentioned drone hacking, again, something that happened a couple of months later. I think it was university researchers in America managed to hack into drones. And so these were things that I, as a social scientist, someone working in international relations, would not have thought about. The way that you could have emerging kind of social chaos due to problems in the banking system linked to computer technology, or to think about drones being hacked. And so, in many ways, what we want to do is try and get people together to think about what could be on the horizon. And I think the interesting thing is what you think, we kind of set the date as 2019. I think because of the speed of technological change, many of the things that we might speculate on will come to us much sooner than that. But anyway, one of the plans, or one of the presentations looked like the plan for a new business. And this group will present their plan in a moment. But what became clear is that we could do much more of this type of work due to the space we have here at Lancaster, the people, the expertise. And so Security Futures is about bringing people together to create interesting interventions on the future, about where we're heading and what we might want to flag up as emerging problems. but also perhaps to create businesses that will respond to the emerging problems on the horizon, and perhaps to help existing businesses and organisations think about the future and the problems that they will confront in this rapidly changing world. So what Dan and I are working on at the moment is a number of techniques to get people thinking about future scenarios. And hopefully in the coming months we're going to kind of have prototypes of these techniques, and in very kind of simple terms, they'll involve assembling different narratives about the future from four main themes: the geopolitical, the economic, the social, and the technological. And each theme will have different themes or different aspects that you can assemble in different ways to create different future scenarios. Future scenarios where you can think about how a technology or a policy might play out in that context. So the plan today is to bring together your perspectives from Bold Creative, where you've been working with young people on emerging problems related to crime, radicalisation and the war on terror, problems in cities, with computer scientists. And I've left the scenario very vague to begin with, because I think in the early stages it's good to see what people will come up with without too much intervention. And so the scenario, or the place that we begin, is troublemakers in the UK in 2019. And as we go on, we can kind of narrow it down. And I wanted to keep it simple today, but I think key things to think about are context. Think about what states or politicians or police might want to do with new policies and new technologies in the UK of 2019. And then think about how young people might test the system in different ways, how they will use and abuse new technology. I think central to the thinking here is the idea that people don't behave as policymakers and politicians would like, and technology is often not used as the designers intended. There's lots of wonderful ideas about the future of smart cities and new technology, but we want to kind of ask the darker questions. You know, what happens when people abuse and use technology in their own ways, for their own ends? Yeah, not the kind of utopian visions of the future, but to add a kind of a more sober or darker element into the equation. So you might want to think about some of the issues that Bold Creative has been interested in the last couple of years, maybe London riots in 2019, radicalisation in 2019, or maybe more mundane issues related to the future of consumer culture. What problems and trends do we see emerging that might present trouble for corporations in the coming years? I mean, what will the future of music consumption be in 2019 and entertainment in general? Yeah, so how will young people cause trouble in 2019? Or it could be, what are the problems that Bold Creative is going to confront in the coming years? You know, what are the emerging trends, the emerging technologies that you might need to think about as a company to get ahead of the curve and start speculating on, start developing ideas on. So, you know, you might want to use it in that way. And so we also want to get your feedback. You know, what do you think universities and kind of institutions like Security Lancaster should be doing for companies like Bold Creative? You know, what can we do for you? So before we get onto the presentation, any questions at this stage?